On today's show, the San Diego Padres lose their fourth straight game thanks to what some are calling a highway robbery of Xander Bogaerts' home run. Reacting to that, reacting to Mike Shildt's reaction and ejection, as well as some questions with Luis Arráez in the lineup and Freddy Fermín. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Tuesday, August 19th. As always, I'm your host with sometimes the most, Javier Reyes, and I've been covering this team for almost 6 years now, not just for this podcast, but also various other outlets, including JustBaseball.com, chief among them. Today's episode, guys, is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is just around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now. And today's show, guys, firstly, let me tell you, check out that FanDuel thing. And also go check me out on the socials at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO on Twitter/X or Blue Sky with any questions, comments, or concerns you might have. But today's episode, we are recapping last night's game, at least some of the big takeaways, whether or not the Padres were robbed. And remember, everybody, go check out the channel on YouTube right afterwards, and then it'll get uploaded to podcast feeds. The postcast with my boy Big Jim Grease. He was in a mood last night, let me tell you. So everybody go check that if you want live reactions and commentary, just the play-by-play sort of stuff right after the game. But let's talk about the big takeaways before we talk about Luis Arráez and Freddy Fermín, a question from a listener. All right, so here's the thing. Nestor Cortes, one of the big takeaways, he goes 5 2/3 in this one. He gives up 4 earned runs on 7 hits, 4 walks, and 5 Ks. I think the outing looks a little tiny bit better if you not remove the first inning, but you take into account that all of the runs happened in the first inning, back-to-back, right? Heliot Ramos home run, Rafael Devers home run, and a Wilmer Flores home run, a guy who has hit the Padres over the years. So not great, but bullpen was great after that, right? No runs allowed. They only allowed 1 hit combines over the next 3 1/3, so that's really cool. At least Nestor did give them some, let's call it just some innings, right? Like, that was good. And this is going to be a question for the Padres down the road. Nick Pivetta is starting tonight's game, which is good, so that should hopefully help ease up the bullpen and what have you, and get it rested up, because they're going to need it, because the back end of this rotation for the Padres has been very uncertain ever since the departures of Stephen Kolek and Ryan Berger, and the uncertainty with Yu Darvish, and most importantly, dare I say, the fact that Michael King is hurt. So we'll have to see how that goes. But I don't think it was that awful, right? Instead, this was a case of the Padres offense doing too little too late, right? They only start showing up in the bottom of the 7th inning. You get Jose Iglesias, putting the ball in play, which I do like about him, is that he does have a little bit of that X factor, like guy who could just create chaos vibes. He can be a little bit of that spark plug, which I like, although there have been a couple times when I think that he shouldn't have been starting, but he did get the start yesterday with Manny being DH. I guess a little bit of a day off for him at third base. Manny going 1 for 4, by the way. A little bit of a slump for Manny. I think it's worth bringing up. Just a little bit. Nothing crazy for Machado. And since he's been carrying the team's offense basically all year, he's got the most RBIs, right? Like, I'm not going to hate on him. I'm just bringing up he is finally entering that slump. And for those who are concerned, right, 548 OPS across 16 games in August so far, right? Not very good. For those concerned, I wouldn't be. It's just, remember, he is capable of a slump just like everybody else is, especially considering that he is an aggressive swinger, more than I think people realize. Now, he's not a Rise level, who we'll get to in the next segment, but he is a very aggressive swinger. But the Padres did score a little bit, thankfully. Again, it was just a little bit too late. Ryan O'Hearn coming in for a pinch hit. The guy that some would argue should have been hitting. He comes in to pinch hit for Jake Cronenworth and hits a 2-run home run to make it 4-3. Unfortunately, the Padres are unable to kind of make any comeback after that, but they tried. You know what I mean? Even Iglesias got a single in the bottom of the 9th. You know what I'm saying? So they tried. Laureano, he grounded into a double play at one point. Like, not great, but the big thing about this game was that Xander Bogaerts had a home run called back. And you might be saying, Javi, how the heck does that happen? Well, the ball was hit to left field, to the porch there, and fans reached over and interfered with it. At least that's what the call was. And Mike Shildt ranted after the game about this as well. But my takeaway from this is this. I am always trying to tread lightly with bad calls in sports, because sometimes you want to be careful not wade into the territory of blaming everything on a bad call, blaming everything on the umpires, right? But this solo shot that Xander Bogaerts had would have been that means that this game would have been tied, right? The fact that they lost by 1 run means something, and especially for a team that doesn't produce a ton of runs. Every run counts. They're a run prevention, good solid team with a couple superstars, right? And the best bullpen in baseball. But they take it back, and one of my issues with it was, let's look back at, say, Derek Jeter, right? He has one of the most famous home runs that should have been called back ever, right? And when you watch the replay, they didn't have replay, they didn't have challenge system at the time. Good job, baseball. Good job. The fact that it's just, isn't it incredible? Quick thing, isn't it incredible that it took them so long to figure out that replays for some calls is actually good, that we should allow some challenges in case something egregious happens? Anyway, that the guy reaches up, I forgot who it was. It could have been, I forgot who it was exactly that reached up, but the fan leans over the porch and the ball never even gets to the guy's glove, and they call it a home run. The Mr. October thing for Jeter, rest is history, right? But it looks like probably should have been fan interference. This play, it looks like Heliot Ramos, who, what I think is worth mentioning, very bad defensive player. I think it is worth mentioning that Heliot Ramos is a very, very bad defensive player. Like, not just like a guy who's maybe not as great, like, say, Jake Cronenworth this year, like some of the defensive mishaps of Tatis back in the day, right? Like, not like that, but like genuinely really, really bad. In left field this year, he has -9 outs above average, -7 defensive runs saved. He's really bad as a defender, like, especially this year. And it's not that the ball gets snatched from him. Instead, it's just that maybe the fans reaching over distracted him, and then the ball bounces off of his glove. So unlike the Jeter play, bounces off the guy's glove and then into the seat. And I agree with Mike Shildt, because on top of the fact that I think this was pretty clearly should be a home run, unless I am misinterpreting the rule and there's some technicality I'm unaware of, but I like what Mike Shildt said. And Mike Shildt was basically like ranting after the game, a guy who's been under fire a little bit. He got asked the question about Arráez and why they're not playing O'Hearn, right? He's feeling a little bit of fire lately, especially after his sweep by the Dodgers this weekend. But he's basically like, if this is such a sure thing and that this is the rule, then why did it take them 2.5 minutes, nearly 3 minutes, to rule a verdict on this? If that's the case, and I have said this for calls that have gone against the Padres, I know I can't prove that, but trust me, believe my soul, believe my preaching right now, I'm always, if it looks too close, then you leave the call that was on the field. And I feel like most people feel the same, but instead it goes against them and the Padres lose by 1 run. So really, really brutal moment for them. It doesn't excuse the lack of offense until the 7th inning, but it is just worth talking about and seeing that, right? And by the way, for what it's worth, cool by Bogaerts, right? Like, just cool by Bogaerts that he actually should have had a home run in this game, right? Like, I'm going to just give him a little bit of credit. I think it should have been a home run. And he also had another hit as well. So it should have been a 2-for-4 game for Xander Bogaerts with a home run, but unfortunately it was not. 0-for-4 from Tatis, just not very good moment for the Padres, but at least somewhat we can at least explain part of it a little bit. But we can't explain everything with the Padres, and we can certainly not explain their lineup decisions as of late, which I have taken the approach of just trust Mike Shildt. He's deserved the benefit of the doubt, but he is under fire, and we got to talk about why. But first, folks, let me tell you about one of our sponsors for today's show. That is our good friends over at the Duelist Fandom. That's right, FanDuel, guys. August 26th. Is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, let me tell you what it is. FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether it's an MVP call, a Offensive Rookie of the Year, eyeing a long shot division winner, or just the Super Bowl champ, before week 1 even kicks off, that is going to be your moment, August 26th. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. And just like that, everybody, we are back here thriving and vibing on the second segment of this here Locked On Padres podcast. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter/X and Blue Sky at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO. Reach out on there to just interact or whatever, and to potentially get your questions answered. And one of them that we didn't finish from yesterday's Monday mailbag will be answered in the third segment. But it's the second segment time, and we got to talk about Mike Shildt a little bit, but more importantly, Luis Arráez, right? So I think that what has been happening over the past, let's just say 3 weeks, I think people are finally a little bit sick of Luis Arráez. And what did it do? It's not that Arráez has been playing horrifically lately, right? He's been a super streaky player. We talked about this last week. Kevin Acey pointed out in his newsletter, like, has 30 good games, then he hits 100 for 20. He has, a 10-game stretch where he's good, then he has a 6-game stretch where he has 1 hit, right? Goes 1 for 20, all this sort of stuff, right? But instead, it's because of the acquisition of Ryan O'Hearn, a player that for the Padres, his numbers don't look incredible, right? This hasn't been a superstar or anything like that. But for the Padres, on the year, just a 200 batting average, 326 on base percentage, and 429 slugging. That's good for 754 OPS. Even not playing as well as he'd been playing this year with Baltimore, where he had an 837 OPS, he is still better with just a 200 average by OPS on base plus slugging than Luis Arráez has been all season. So naturally, Shildt has been under fire. And we talked about this a little bit yesterday. Shildt has been under fire because everyone's like, why would you trade all these assets you have, right? Boston Bateman, I think Tyson Neighbors, like that big trade you did with the Orioles. I would understand to a degree if it's like, well, Robo Laureano, he's got a whole nother year left. Right, we got another year of control. That's our left fielder, and he's been a beast, right? But Ryan O'Hearn, he's only a rental, and he's a slugger, right? And he's your bench bat. And here's more importantly the issue: why does Luis Arráez, with the way he has played this season, not his whole career, not his resume, but this season, and by the way, on top of this season, last year too, it should be brought up. Luis Arráez has not been the hitter with the Padres that he was beforehand. And even beforehand, he had a little bit of issues, right? Don't get me wrong. I still think he was a good player. Before the Padres with Miami, 861 OPS. He has 795 OPS. He's had a 765 before. His first year, he had an 838 OPS in just 92 games. He has been good. But with the Padres, he had a 744 OPS last year, 724 this year. So whatever the average is between those two, that is not, to me, a guy that has earned a monopoly share of the opportunities, when instead you could be using Ryan O'Hearn. And I think a lot of people are bringing up with Luis Arráez that this is a guy that has no threat of being a home run guy, right? The fact that he gives up a first pitch strike every single at bat is another problem I have. I understand he's a good bat to ball guy, but starting every count 0-1 is bad. And you know who I'm going to cite as well as an example of this? Xander Bogaerts. I know you guys might be like, what? What do you mean with Xander Bogaerts? Isn't his whole thing plate discipline and all that? He waits on pitches too, right? Yes, but he does not let as many pitches go right down the middle the way that Luis Arráez does, right? And I think that's the issue that I have here, which is that first pitch strike percentage, by the way, for Xander Bogaerts, his first year with the Padres was 60.3, which wasn't great. Then it went up, most importantly, 66.3. Bogaerts wasn't comfortable swinging the bat. Then it went back down. He brought his first pitch strike percentage way back down to 60%, and it's been decreasing as time has gone along during the year. And all of a sudden, coincidence that Bogaerts is playing better? I'm not saying, and I've complained on this show before about people swinging on the first pitch, mostly because it's the most frustrating thing in baseball to see. When it's like RBI opportunity, the tension's up, first pitch ground out, right? It stinks. But you need to show a willingness that you're going to swing on the first pitch. And especially when you're Arráez, because Arráez swings at everything. He doesn't take walks. So he is going into plate appearances, and pitchers are like, cool. So he's giving me a free strike. He's probably going to swing on strike two. And since he never strikes out, I can just throw him a pitch wherever it is. And sure, he'll make contact and sometimes he'll get a hit. But it won't be for a lot, right? Because of the fact that defenses can play in because he has no power. And it's not going to be an infield hit because he doesn't have a lot of speed, right? I was really annoyed with the way that he tried to bunt on an 0-2 count or an 0-1 count against Clayton Kershaw over the weekend on Friday. I was like, what are you doing here exactly? With nobody on base. It didn't make any sense to me. All of those things coalesce into a player that is becoming a problem. And for me, I would much rather have Arráez lower in the lineup. And I understand Jackson Merrill's hurt, so keep that in mind, right? Obviously, without one of your center fielders, you got to change the lineup up a little bit. But I'd rather put Arráez down. And more importantly, I'd rather hit Ryan O'Hearn, who has 4 extra base hits against left-handed pitching already with the Padres. You know how many Luis Arráez has against left-handed pitching this year? 4 in total, right? He has a 79 or so WRC plus. I'll look it up right now, against pitching from the left side. For those who don't remember WRC plus, it basically is a good rating to tell you, independent of all other factors, how good a hitter is, right? So 100 is average, and then if you're 105, you're 5% above average, right? Luis Arráez this year, 105 WRC plus in general. That's not horrible. It's a fine player. It's a fine bat. But I'd much rather him be a bench bat, especially when it's against lefties, who this year, by the way, if you want to just use batting average, he's hitting 258. 76 WRC plus as well. So he's about 23% worse than your average batter against lefties. And he's been good against righties. 119 WRC plus this year. So why does this guy have a monopoly on these appearances? And by the way, you know who else has a higher OPS against lefties? Bryce Johnson. Bryce Johnson has a better OPS than him this year. 740. Right? So this is my problem. Why is he getting a monopoly of the position? I know I've been overusing that word. My apologies. But I don't understand why Shildt. It just feels like he's being a little bit stubborn. I'm not saying that Arráez isn't useful. I'm not saying that at all. Let me be very clear. I actually think that there are incidents in which him being a bench bat late in game, maybe it's second and third, and maybe you're like, let's pinch hit for Jay Cronenworth here and have Luis Arráez come up. Maybe, right? I'm just giving a hypothetical scenario. There's a lot of other factors there, but then he goes and plays second base, at least a position he hasn't played well, but at least he plays it, right? I think that makes a lot more sense. And to me, I do wonder, like, would my dream lineup, I think, I would change it. And I just, again, Luis Arráez has not been that good, and we only have a rental of Ryan O'Hearn. And at the very minimum, the guy can walk a little bit. And it's not like this is a fluke year. This isn't Adam Frazier. Now, the 130 WRC plus that my man Ryan O'Hearn was rocking this year, that is a career high. But both of the last two seasons, 117, 17% better than your average major league hitter at the plate. That's good. Like, he's at least clearly shown over these last few years of Baltimore that he's a good hitter and has been better even those years that were his career best than what Luis Arráez is doing right now. He's a frustrating player to watch that I'd much rather see on the bench, at least when we're playing lefties, who he, objectively speaking, has struggled with this season. So that's my thing. That's my take. And I absolutely believe Shildt deserves a lot of slack for that. You know what I mean? I don't think he maybe necessarily always deserves flack for the bullpen decisions. Mason Miller, right? I was critical of that, but it's also fair that you could just as easily be like, hey, Mookie Betts wasn't that good this year. You know, we want to maybe give Mason Miller a little bit more rest. Robert Suarez hadn't pitched in 4 days. Okay, right? And not to mention, you want to, you Mason Miller, you have him as your closer. That's fine. He is probably the best raw stuff talent guy in this bullpen now. But stuff like this, it just feels like we should be playing him more. It really, really does. I wouldn't mind Ryan O'Hearn being the fourth hitter. I wouldn't, right? Put Manny third, then maybe put Arráez fifth. I'd be a fan of that. Or maybe put Bogaerts fifth and Arráez sixth. This is not me saying Luis Arráez stinks. I just don't think he's being utilized well, considering that his past days of being a 330 hitter, when you're doing what he was doing before, I didn't care if it was all singles and you weren't walking enough, right? But he's not walking as much as he was that best year he had, right? Which is about like 8%, which definitely is very good. And he is certainly not hitting the ball as well as he usually does. And he's giving up first pitch strikes. That's not what I want at the top of the lineup. There's been times this year with Tatis where I feel like he would have had a stolen base, but then Arráez swing at a pitch outside the zone to foul it off or put it in play, whatever. It just doesn't feel right, and I'd like to see a change. And folks, when it comes to change, let me tell you, some people are more reticent to it than others. And we'll talk about why in just a second. But first, before we get to that, guys, I need to take a chance to talk to you about the legendary folks over at Prize Picks. That is who is sponsoring today's episode, guys. The daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards, with preseason already heating up and college football not too far behind either. Whether you've got your eye on big name quarterbacks or breakout running backs, Prize Picks makes it easy to get in on the game. Me personally, I'm most excited for Joe Burrow because he's on my fantasy team in my super deep 14 team league. Oh yeah, and I have Jamar Chase, so that should be a lot of fun. But it's a lot of fun, guys. All you have to do, it's simple to play, just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and if you get your picks right, you could cash in and win up to 2,000 times your money. Plus, they've got a flex play option, total game changer. Even when one of your picks misses, you can still double your money. All that sort of stuff. It's great. And a bunch of other promos that they come out with. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. Prize Picks, run your game. And just like that, everybody, we are back here thriving and vibing into the final segment of today's show. Thank you for everybody for listening. And one more time, let me just tell you, follow me on Twitter/X or Blue Sky at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO. Today's segment, or at least final third segment, is based off of a comment that I got from our boy Tony Sue, who says that he has some blame on Freddy Fermín. And he thinks that the coaching staff has to take some responsibility for not anticipating the mistakes Fermín is making that are costing the Padres games. Most fans are going to blame Suarez for giving up that home run to Mookie, but I heap a considerable amount of blame on Fermín for that too. When Suarez missed on those first 2 pitches to Mookie, Fermín had to understand the game situation and call a mound visit immediately to make it clear with Suarez whether to continue to try to get Mookie out or just walk him. After all the bases were empty and if Betts was walked, you could still go after Will Smith, Freddie Freeman, and the 2 behind in the lineup. Suarez really needed to be on the same page with Fermín at that point, which I agree with. They always have to be on point, right? But whether it was whether it was better to give up on Mookie and go on to the next batter or keep trying to get Mookie out, but now down a couple of balls. Instead, it looks like Suarez felt to get Mookie out, he had to throw a clear strike, which was near the heart of the zone, and Mookie was waiting for it. This is the second time I've questioned Fermín's preparation, feel for the situation, and judgment that failed and contributed mightily to the loss of the game. The first time was the first time Fermín caught Vasquez and Estrada was brought in to pitch in relief. Fermín continued to call pitches as though Vasquez was still pitching, and I think it was 6 pitches later Estrada still had not thrown a single fastball of any type and gave up the game-winning homer. Of course, Vasquez's repertoire is completely different than Estrada's, and Estrada should have been pitching mostly fastballs with splitters mixed in. In my opinion, this is intolerable. No matter how well Fermín is hitting, the Padres have won based on playing smart baseball and minimizing mistakes, and in my opinion, Fermín has been a big part of at least 2 losses. So, I have a lot of issues with this question that I'm going to talk about, right? So first of all, I think the idea, like, just get ready to walk Mookie Betts is not paying attention to the situation as you were talking about with Freddie Fermín, Tony. Because Freddie Fermín, forget him for a second, Freddie Freeman and Will Smith, unlike Mookie Betts, having great years. So instead, for Suarez to be more aggressive against a Will Smith or against a Mookie Betts actually makes more sense to me. He just missed. It happens. And yes, he could have called a mound visit. I understand. But I think it is very curious to me, and why I disagree with this notion is because while it is true, right, that you got to be on the same page with your catcher, I think the idea that we're going to blame Freddie Fermín for these 2 losses as if you have not messaged me, at least from what I've seen, about Martin Maldonado and Elias Diaz, right? 2 catchers that verifiably were quite bad, right? Right? For the Padres, you're blaming Fermín, a player who has actually hit well, right? So far with the Padres, right? It does absolutely matter how well he's hitting. He's got a 757 OPS. He's hitting 318 with a 348 on base. He's been getting singles. It's great, especially for a catcher. For you to be blaming him, who actually has some good defensive metrics, by the way, instead of never once bringing up Maldonado or Elias Diaz, right? The former of the 2 having some of the worst defensive metrics in baseball when Suarez blew up for them. That's right. It's not like this is the first time Suarez has been a mistake, right? You remember the Angels game? Well, we had those catchers catching back then, and he was walking everybody. You know what I mean? So that is my issue here, is the idea that Freddie Fermín, who's actually hitting and actually has good defense, that he's to blame for these losses. No, the one to blame is Robert Suarez. Could Fermín do a little bit of a better job? Sure. But also, another point, he just got here, right? So are we really going to start blaming him for that? Robert Suarez has had a problem with hard hit contact for a while. His changeup isn't working as effectively as it did at the beginning of the season. And also, it was last year too, especially in the second half, a 4.28 ERA in the second half. It might just be that Suarez isn't some super duper stud. Instead, he's a good reliever that can get you a strikeout every now and then. The velocity is a joy to watch every now and then. But overall, I'm not going to sit here and start blaming Freddie Fermín. Freddie Fermín has been one of the great joys of the deadline. And I understand that maybe that home run, you could have had a mistake there, but I just don't understand why we're not bringing up how potentially maybe Maldonado or Diaz didn't call a timeout when he gave up these game-tying home runs before. Remember the one that he gave up? Forget the Angels meltdown from about 2 months ago, right? Remember the Mark Vientos one? Remember when he blew that game? And I was there. I saw it. I was there. I was in person. It was great. Shout out Petco Park. We love you very much. You're the best. So that's what I take issue with this question. I think Freddie Fermín has been unequivocally better than Maldonado and Diaz. Well, unequivocally better than Maldonado. Diaz has had a couple moments. He's a replacement level catcher, a fine player to have on your major league roster, especially as a backup. Like, he's fine. He can at least go in there and do things. But for Freddy Fermín, that's a guy who gives you some defensive upside. And the fact that he's hitting well does make up for some of these things. So that's my issue is Maldonado, by wins above replacement, literally had negative WAR this year. And I'm not talking just like a negative 0.1. Like, Maldonado playing as much as he did, genuinely insane, right? Negative 0.8 wins above replacement. That's crazy. Like, actively was making the things worse for the Padres. And if you're it came out of nowhere. He had an 11 WRC plus in 48 games last year. Negative 1.5 wins above replacement. That's not better. Negative 0.9 the year before that, right? So this is my issue, is just I don't want to start blaming some players for small, minor, possible mistakes instead of the guys that we know are actively not good. And you guys might say I'm looking into the stats too much, but I actually don't think in the case of Diaz and Maldonado it says much. I think everybody knows they're not as good. Remember how many pass balls Maldonado let go by? I don't like it, right? So that's just my take. But overall, Freddy Fermín's the catcher. And this Padres bullpen is susceptible to things, especially with Robert Suarez. And in general, just because I feel a little bit better about this roster doesn't mean that it's a guarantee they make the playoffs. I'm optimistic, and I have changed a little bit of my stance from prior to the season. I said the Padres would miss the playoffs and win like 87, 86 games. Now I think they could absolutely still make it, but they have been a little bit in trouble. And I love that all of a sudden, everyone's back on my side, right? First it was, Javi, change your opinion. They look great, right? And I'm like, well, hold on. We still got like 2 months left of baseball, right? And most of my trade deadline opinions I haven't gone back on. I still am worried about giving up such a big asset in DeVries for a relief pitcher. I always will be. I don't care who the reliever is. Unless you know it's Mariano Rivera. This guy's going to be good for another 15 years as your closer, right? I would be worried about that. I would. And we'll see how it pans out. But overall, thank you for the question, Tony. I think you also brought up a good point on some other issue related to Michael King that maybe we'll bring up on tomorrow's podcast. A little bit of a Michael King conspiracy from Tony Sue that I love very, very much. So we will talk about that. But overall, not the best night for Padres baseball. Hopefully they can get back on the wagon, get some runs, score a little bit. Nasty Nick Pivetta on the mound. It's okay. Let's hold steady. Just 5 days ago, all y'all were like, we win in the World Series. And I'm not just talking about listeners here. It's the Vegas, it's the FanDuel bettors. They're like, I got the winning the World Series. Literally, like the Padres have vaulted up into being a World Series people before this sweep this weekend, right? So let's stay the course. Got a lot of game left. It ain't over till it's over, folks. Except for this podcast, which is over because I'm saying it's over, guys. The Locked On Padres podcast, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. Remember to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. Follow me on Twitter/X or Blue Sky. And until next time, stay safe and, of course, stay faithful. My faithful homies. Take care.